Welcome to this morning's webinar about zero trust strategy in practice. Well, we will go through a little bit of theory, then show some practical examples as well. And a few words about me. My name is Sasha, and I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP as well. Microsoft certified trainer and regional lead as well, and also EC Council instructor and certified ethical hacker, and etc. And let's go with the webinar and see what it is all about. First of all, let's take a look why we are having a zero trust conversation at all. So in this case, the security is complex, and our goal is to keep the assets away from attackers. Why zero trust? Because the security landscape has changed significantly from the past years, and the security of the IT of today, it's complex. There are many devices, users, connections, and we are not having our assets in between four walls on premises only, but most of the companies are now, as the cloud has become the prevalent choice of today, are transferring some old or some workloads to the cloud as well. So the attack landscape also shifted toward these assets that are not anymore on premises, and with the proliferation of the bring your own devices, with the proliferation of the devices, of the mobile devices, laptops and tablets, and with the people on the go, the assets that the attackers are targeting are not in on-premises anymore, just only on the premises, but mostly outside. So the attacks have become more sophisticated, as the sophisticated landscape has also become more wide. The trusted network security strategy, initially, the initial attacks were network-based because the data was only inside four walls, and these were seemingly simple and economical, and also accepted lower security within network. But as the assets have left the network, then work from home, bring your own device, and everything mobile and software as a service, infrastructure as a service, attackers have shifted to the cloud as well. We'll just go and see what the point of the zero trust is, and why do we actually have zero trust conversation. Before, when we had on-premises data, then this data was there sitting, and when we access this data, the actions on that data are actions as entities, or any entity actions in the data center, and the four walls were not examined. But today, with the proliferation of the cloud and the cloud applications and the cloud workloads, we can't go with the same philosophy anymore, because first, when we access the files on the working day, and when we, for example, access the files during the weekend, imagine that, for example, let's take a disgruntled employee that has been downloading massively the data. Previously, this would be very hard to detect, because the data have been accessed by a legitimate user, and no baseline for user behavior was there. Today, we have the philosophy of zero trust, meaning that we don't trust anyone in accessing our data or doing anything with our data. So, in the zero trust philosophy, these actions would be also addressed. But these attackers, why were we talking about zero trust, and why we are talking about having no trust? Because of according to some research, and the median time between between the attack or breach was done and detected is between 90, 180, or 240 days. And with the zero trust philosophy, or with the zero trust strategy, actually zero trust is a strategy, we are trying to diminish that, these days to a minimum, possibly minutes, and even preventing these to happen by having a layered security. So just an overview of why it is important to have the zero trust conversation. So defenders actually should measure success by how much they have raised the cost of the cost attacks for attackers, and while important for planning, actually the security return on investment is difficult to calculate. So we have the impact and we have the likelihood, and the many businesses outcomes are unknown and difficult to measure, and as well as many key factors can fluctuate in the short term. For example, attack operators are adaptive humans, and so on. So we have two things to deal with. We are dealing with defender return and defender investment. While defender return is composed of the ability to reduce the attacker return on investment, which has the effect of discouraging the opportunistic attacks and reducing the frequency or success of these attacks. And attacker return on investment is an important factor that actually defenders must work to influence. So attacker return is largely out of the influence of control of individual defenses, but you can impact this with rapid response and recovery. And the attacker investment is the best opportunity for a defender to influence success by adopting strategy that is focused on defeating the cheapest attack mechanisms. First, you can force an attacker to increase investment of money, time, resources, and that is the lower the return on investment. And zero trust actually does exactly this. We need to have a layered approach to security, and each layer of the security actually adds a cost, raises the knowledge, raises the capability of attacker, therefore actually increases the time to get to that data, and that means we are increasing the cost of attackers, actually ruining their return on investment. So the zero trust idea is not new. It has been here for a while, and it's been here first mentioned somewhere in 2004, 2005 on the Jericho forum, and afterwards all main technology leaders and companies have been mentioning the zero trust in their white papers, in the communication, and actually having the strategy and some products that deal with zero trust strategy. Zero trust is not a product, zero trust is a philosophy, and zero trust is an approach to security. So there are some trends and challenges that we are facing as defenders, and one big fact that we need to know is that we as defenders, we need to be right all the times. Out of billion times of the attacks, we have to be right. We have to successfully defend ourselves, but the attacker has to be right just once. It means that the attacker just once has to be right, and we have to be wrong to breach the defenses and get to our data. So our task is much harder, but not impossible. So we do have to have a little bit of knowledge and strategy and the right approach. And the right approach today is the zero trust approach, with the threat landscape shifted and the defense landscape shifted to the identities. So attackers are using identities to bypass network controls. We have a few trends and challenges in this case. Phishing and allows attackers to impersonate valid user identities and so on. So there are passwords that are today not enough to protect identities, and there's also a very big problem of the identities being used outside the network. So these identities, we as humans are social beings. We are susceptible to phishing scams, and therefore the identity today is the new security boundary. The attackers, of course, to minimize their cost and to increase the return on investment, they hang on to they attack or they target the lowest hanging fruit. And the lowest hanging fruit, the most easier resource to attack these days are we, the users, the identities, because it's much greater cost, and the probability of succeeding attacking a data center is it's much smaller than obtaining a password from a user or breaching some account and then gaining access to that account. So the identities are the new identity is the new security boundary. And along with identities comes also the protection of other things as well. So the zero trust principle, like zero trust is a strategy. Zero trust has three principles. It has the verify explicitly, so we are not trusting anyone. Always authenticate, so we need to always authenticate and authorize based on all available data points, so including user identity, location, device health, data classification, and anomalies. So in the previous case where we had a disgruntled employee exfiltrating data and mass downloading, this will be his actions or her actions. Its actions will be tested, and the identity will be tested. We will verify the location, the devices that this user is accessing the data from, the typical user behavior, and look for any anomalies. So the second principle is the least privilege principle. So we need to minimize user access with just-in-time and just enough access controls, risk-based adaptive policies, and everything. So in this cloud era, this is it is harder to protect, but fortunately we have tools that not only span just cloud infrastructure and workloads, but also these span as well the on-premises workloads and other cloud workloads, and we have also tools to enforce just-in-time and just enough administration. And third one is the assumed breach. We are, like I said multiple times, we have to minimize scope of breach damage and prevent lateral movement by segmenting access by network, by user devices, and application awareness. So it's building a multiple layers of protection and of security around our data. So strengthening networks rules, strengthening implementing firewalls, just-in-time access, identity checks, and everything that we have actually to protect our access as much as possible. And we have some most prominent technology that in these days are emerging, like carriers of the zero trust technology strategy. And in these are conditional access, for example. In the never trust, always verify organization and infrastructure in the cloud. We have some sort of conditional access, and we have to achieve that and to conditionally allow or disallow access. We need to test a few signals to make an informed decision. So we are testing, we are checking the device risk, we are checking the user risk. So for example, whether the user has the multi-factor authentication, whether the user is behaving signals, whether the user is behaving normally or abnormally, whether the device is the trusted device, or whether the device is clean or healthy, and so on. Based on these signals, that a lot of signals, then we make we are then capable to make a decision based on organization policies that we establish. For example, we re-evaluate all these signals during the session, and also apply these policies. For example, where based on these signals that we detected, we can then allow limit access, but in a limited fashion, or remediate risks, or for example, the user will be allowed to go to access the resources after the device has been rechecked, and deemed healthy, or we will trigger a multi-factor authentication challenge, and after successfully passing it will actually the user will be able to access the data and so on, or completely block access, for example. And then we enforce these across all the applications, the software as a service applications, legacy ones, and so on. For example, we can limit these to certain applications like Exchange or Azure Portal or SharePoint sites or OneDrive or whatever, Office, and so on, and to certain groups and users, etc. And how it looks like in the Microsoft ecosystem, well, we have the conditional access, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory conditional access, and we have the user threats, signals, and everything in here. So we have a multi-factor authentication, we have user and session risk checked and validated, we have the session validated, we have the device validated, device threat risk signals that we pick up, and then we make a decision. We analyze these signals, and based on the conditional access policies, we require or block access and require some actions. For example, reset password or access or enforcing user to access data from a different location in case the location is not permitted, etc. There's a huge ecosystem that support this, and in Azure Active Directory conditional access, for example, this is the similar slide as we've seen. We have on one side the conditions and the trusted devices and physical virtual location that is tested, client application authorization methods, and the signals that Microsoft is actually analyzing, and through machine learning normalization and through the real-time evaluation engine, then Microsoft engine is capable of determining the session risk based on these signals and allowing or disallowing access on the specific applications, on apps, and cloud or on premises. So let's quickly take a look at how was this before. We had previously we had a situation where we had a limited visibility. We had a limited signals that we have been testing. Then we have a network perimeter previously was composed of several functions, and then we used only allow or block based on these signals. But today the ecosystem is a little bit more difficult and a little bit more complex, so we need to gather up more signals from different entities, not firewalls or ID or IP devices anymore, that are not valid in this case, but we need to gather the signals from user from device state, and then gather and make an action, not just allow or block, but actually allow, block, allow, restricted, require MFA out of these signals. So very simply, so when, for example, let's say that a user is logging in with a device and attempting to access an internal file in Office 365, and that user authenticates, provides valid credentials. Let's suppose that the user is a valid one, and the user and device information checks are being performed, and the conditional risk level is low. So because the user is belonging to the sales account representative, it accesses the data from the known location, like from London, UK, and the device is running on Windows, and the group is allowed users, London users, and the last sign was 5 hours ago. Then so far is good, because the client has the person is accessing the data from the browser that's allowed, and but the configuration here is anonymous, and the conditional access risk then is raised. And if the unfamiliar sign-in location for this user is detected, so for example, if a device has been last seen in Asia, or the user has been last seen in Asia or somewhere else, and the system determines that that location is not a familiar one, or that the time between two sign-ins has passed, meaning that the impossible travel is here what it's suspected of, and the conditional access risk is raised, and from low to medium and from medium to high, based on the signals detected. And then we can determine the risk of the whole action, user and device together, and then block access or force threat remediation, and or allow, depending on what the signals are. So how does this looks like? Actually, it looks pretty simple. And if we go to the let's go to the actual Azure, and let's go to the Azure Active Directory, and if we go to the security in here, and the security blade here has the information about the protection management and reporting of the security. And under protect, there's the conditional access. So the conditional access in this case does not have any policies, but I can create few. So let's just take a look at what the conditional access policy comprises of. So it has the assignments, it has the access controls. The assignments group has users and groups, and the users and groups, cloud apps, and actions conditions, and then the access control has the grant and sessions. So if the assignments is here, users and groups, I can choose all the guest users and directory roles, users and groups, or include or exclude ones. Then I can choose the cloud apps or actions. I can choose to which cloud apps or actions this policy will apply. And then, for example, I will select, for example, an app, and this is the, for example, Azure, let's say Azure Management, or for example, this will apply only to, let's say, Azure Portal, for example, in this case. Then after I've done that, then I can select the conditions, and the conditions are here listed. The conditions that are evaluated are user risk, sign-in risk, device platforms, and other things that are allowed or not allowed. For example, if the user risk is high, medium, low, and if the sign-in risk is the in one of these levels, and if a user is accessing from any of these platforms, all or included or excluded from these locations, we can then specify locations in previous menus at a different place. We can have trusted locations based on country, based on countries, or IPs, IP addresses, or IP ranges, and then also configure client apps to which these login attempts login attempts apply, as well as device state, which is still in preview. So after we've decided the assignments, then we can choose what to do if all of this happens, and if all of these applies to these uh, circumstances that we've chosen. So we can then grant or block access, or grant with requiring multi-factor authentication, or requiring device to be held marked as compliant, and or requiring password change, and so on, depending on the policy. And we can have multiple policies in this case. And that will target multiple applications, multiple users, different situations and circumstances, and so on. And one important part is that down there we have policy enablement on and off. We can create policy and then let it turn off, or report only. I suggest that if you create a policy, then that you enable the policy in report only mode, so you can test the policy to see how it works, to which users it will apply, and how it perform. So it is the one also precautionary step, not to lock yourself out. For example, if you require the authentication for admin users, and you are the one of the admins, you can also have the possibility to lock yourself out, or to limit the user actions in a way that they are really disturbed and cannot perform their actions as needed. So just create it and make it report only. Once you see the policy works as intended, then you can easily turn it on. And the policies should be first tested on a specific, not organizational wide, but only on specific type of users. For example, IT users are the first one that the conditional access policy are tested, or some pilot groups. So just to be on the safe side, not to apply the policy, the organization-wide policy, to all users and then have some problems with that. And one very important part is also this one, and this is the multi-factor authentication. Passwords today are expensive and insecure, and we as users try to simplify things and go with the least complicated thing. So we are simplifying the passwords if we don't use some password managers. And also these password managers are today are something that are not used widely, but the multi-factor authentication today is one very good technology, and a very nice technology that will make your organization very secure. And according to some studies, at least 90, by introducing multi-factor authentication, at least 99% of the problems with identity breaches can be resolved. So the attacks on passwords or the problems with passwords are reused credentials, or weak passwords, or phishing attempts, spear phishing attempts, which are even more dangerous. And the attacks today are getting more and more sophisticated. So at least 80% of breaches are leverage stolen or weak passwords. And in this case, the multi-factor authentication will prevent, this is not a silver bullet, but it will prevent almost 100%, well, 99.9% of identity attacks. And there are a few ways to enable MFA, and by using conditional access that we've seen, it is the most versatile way of enabling MFA. And then there's the security defaults, and that is also one way to enable it. And how the security defaults are enabled very easily. If we go to security, And actually, if we go not to security, but if we go to the properties of our tenant, and then if we go down there, then we have manage security defaults. So enabling security defaults, what it does, let's click and learn more. What it does, actually, it turns on all these things here. So it requires users to register for ADM, for MFA, requires administrators to perform MFA, and it blocks legacy authentication protocols, and also requires users to perform MFA when necessary, etc., etc. So this is the second one, the second most desirable method by enabling MFA. And the third one would be per user account, which is not recommended because it's a legacy way of enabling MFA. It's manual labor, so conditional access is still number one to implement this organizational wide. And the best thing will be to eliminate passwords altogether. So we are approaching, well, the passwordless world here. And fortunately enough, today we have support for passwordless sign-in in the Azure or in the Office 365 as well, and in few flavors or forms. Let's say we have Microsoft Authenticator, we have Windows Hello for Business, which is also very good because the facial recognition or PIN is only tied to that device that you've set it up on, and even if your PIN is stolen, it won't be valid anywhere except on that device. So the person stealing your data will need to have your PIN and device, which is also well, diminishing the percentage of probability by doing that. And fortunately, today Azure or Microsoft 365, well, Azure 10 AD tenant supports also the partial authentication, which has gone in the general availability. The FIDO keys that we see here are supported, and this is not the exclusive list. There are more, but these are the most prevalent ones, ubiquitation and AWBM and so on. So from the Ubico, there are these keys, version 4 and version 5, and from Fashion there are others as well, and from EWBM as well. How does this work? Very simplified. So how it works, and if we go to the security, and if we go in the authentication methods, then we have the possibility to define the FIDO2 security key or define the Microsoft Authenticator as the way to log in. So first of all, you need to have the physical keys available. Of course, these are the ones that we have chosen. So the Ubico keys, and then you have to go in there and enable it for target users, all selected users. And then there's also the possibility, if the organization only allows a certain type of keys, then you can also restrict specific keys by enforcing key restrictions. So each manufacturer and each specific product has its own a good, and by entering these numbers, you will limit the use of only approved keys. And if you've done that, then let's go and see how it works. So of course you need to click save. The other passwordless authentication method is Microsoft Authenticator. It's the free app, and it's very good. And it's also recently it has been updated to support also the password entering. It works like password manager, like 1Password, for example. And of course, the Azure Active Directory supports all of these. So by enabling this and clicking save, save what is the experience. So let's go in and try to log in into the portal, into the Office 365. So for example, when we enable this, let's enter the credentials, username and password. So then sign in, and then I'm prompted to log in to approve sign-in request. I can, depending on the types of the authentication, I can sign in another way. I can use the security key, approve a request on Authenticator app by using phone and user verification code, but I will use the Yubico 5C key, and I'm plugging this thing in, and I'll use the security key. The security key is recognized, and what I have to do is enter PIN, making sure it's you. Yes, I have to enter PIN, and by entering the PIN, I have to touch the security key. It checks for the physical touch, and that's it. State sign in. Let's say yes, and there you go. I've signed in using passwordless authentication. So by using the keys only, the physical keys to authenticate, it is possible to do that as well. Then some keys like this one has also the near field contact chip as well. It supports also these. So you can also log in by just touching the key on your phone, for example, and log in online. And how can you set up these things? Go to the view account for the administrative account, for example, if it's if you are setting up for yourself. And on the myaccount.microsoft.com, under the security info, you'll see the information about the security logins. And after a few moments, let's go and we'll see the security information in here. And afterwards, then I will see you'll see the default methods that have been added. Microsoft Authenticator, which is the app that is supported, or security key that I have here. And we can then add any other method that we like phone, email, security key that is available and enabled organizational wide. So using one of these keys and performing a login using passwordless authentication actually raises the security greatly. You don't have to type in your password. You don't have you can have a very complex password and have it written down somewhere and not type it in anymore, because you have just to plug in the key and log in using the key, actually. So other things that we have for to enable Zero Trust access, well, to go through the Zero Trust access path is some other things as well. For example, isolate administrative interfaces and protect all monitor and administrative interfaces for servers devices, and let's say having the privileged admin workstation. And depending on where we are in the Zero Trust strategy implementation, then we can enable privileged identity management if available, because PIM, or privileged identity management, is the part of the Active Directory Premium P2. And also enforce role-based access control, which means we are enforcing the just-in-time access, or and as well just enough administration, randomized passwords, local ones, and also the one good thing would be to have a restrict administration rights on server host, as well as to have the privileged admin workstation, which is the special hardened workstation that is specifically hardened for use for administrators. And there's also one very good thing. Well, it is the security is not one big switch in Azure or in Office 365, but we have the possibility to increase the security all the way along, and that means that we have either Azure firewall or third-party firewall restricting access using network security groups and using service endpoints, especially using some security appliances and rerouting the traffic towards these to inspect the traffic if we have some security appliances, of course, and eventually implementing DDoS protection and privileged identity management as well. So if we have a Active Directory P2, then we are able to use that too. So let's take a look at the privileged identity management quickly. And this privileged identity management in here, let's go to this one, and portal azure.com, and there are some other things as well, like limiting the leakage of data. So Azure AD privileged identity management is just enough administration tool for privileged identities. In short, what it does, it helps you it helps you take a look at and discover administrative accounts with administrative privileges in your organization, and restrict or manage and organize the privileged accounts. So you will do there are review access. The access reviews are reviews of it's practically scanning through all the tenant of your organizational tenant and discovering how many users have administrative roles and whether they are using these roles or not. And if you discover that users are not using their roles frequently, then you can demote them from the administrative roles to the, you can strip away administrative roles from them and demote them to just ordinary users. Or there's also one very good thing, that is you can make them eligible administrators or eligible privileged users. What does it mean? It means that there's a possibility to have a similar as we have on Windows 10 user account control access, or just-in-time access for identities. It means that these users will become administrators or will resume their administrative roles when they request access for these roles, and these access requests are tracked, and after the user has been granted an administrative role, which has to be justified, we have also that option as well, then this user will have this administrative role only active for a certain period of time, for a few hours, for example. And after, let's say, 5 hours pass, or 10 or 2 hours, then the user won't have administrative roles anymore. So in this case, even if the user passwords or credentials are stolen, then the user won't be able to actually have the thief won't actually have the administrative account credentials, but rather the normal user accounts, because the admin privileged identity management has to approve the access when the users request these elevated privileges. And if we talk about the about just-in-time access for the For the infrastructure, this is also possible because we have Azure Defender, which is the part of the security center. Azure Defender also has the ability to time limit the access to your virtual machines, for example, and to the infrastructure, and by incorporating a time-bound access to the ports that are going to be open for a certain limited time, of course. And this is also one part of that should be one part of the Zero Trust implementation strategy as well. So there are a lot of moving parts where we can implement Zero Trust. And Zero Trust is not unified across all organizations. Zero Trust strategy will be different for each and every organization that chooses to follow the Zero Trust strategy and philosophy. So depending on the infrastructure the organization has, and depending on the assets they need to protect, we might see one or more application protection methods introduced. So, for example, if we have an encrypted something, whether these are for example keys or using Azure Key Vault, or some whether we are using physical keys like FIDO keys. Encryption and using keys is not a panacea, because this is not silver bullet. So the protection and the security is as good as we are keeping our secrets safe as well, and limiting the access to the secret and protecting their keys. So no matter how secure, how great and big and secure our environment is, if we are not protecting access to our keys, to our physical keys or virtual keys that are stored, for example, in Azure Key Vault, then everything falls apart if these are not protected and treated accordingly. I've also mentioned previously a few minutes ago the Azure Security Center, and which is a window to Azure and other cloud security posture and status. And there's also the possibility to incorporate also the artificial intelligence and machine learning, and by using Azure Sentinel, which is the Microsoft product to hunt threats in the cloud, and also analyze user and entity behavioral data as well. And Azure Sentinel today protects actually analyze the data from third-party application, third-party devices, also as the Azure Security as well, Center as well, from Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, Office 365, and others as well. And it is the there is no one, like I said, there's no one big switch that is actually there for us to turn on, but rather the Zero Trust or security is achieved by fine-tuning and implementing layered security all over the infrastructure, all over the servers, or all over the places that toll products that we have. And no matter how insignificant you might think that the security tweaks or actions might be, the overall security posture is a cumulative as a sum of all the security settings that we've set up. So no security setting is too small to actually to set up and to configure. We need to, a few closing words, we need to enable defense in depth for comprehensive infrastructure security, protect data at rest, deploy firewalls, and enable threat protection, and assess continuously, create policies, get compliance insights, and remediate with building guidance. Then turn on MFA, reducing an attack surface by blocking legacy authentication, and automation of the threat remediation. For example, Azure Security Center and Sentinel also support workbooks and automation too, enabling service capabilities. And there's one thing that we usually forget, and that is or actually neglect, and then classification of the information as well. Defining where the sensitive data is, and establishing the data taxonomy is also very important. And incorporating all the tools that we need to protect the data, for example, like DLP, data loss protection policies in Office, in Microsoft 365, and so on. Azure Information Protection for labeling and protection, including rights management service. And as well, we need to strengthen the security posture with insights and guidance. So create policies, enable controls. You'll use built-in recommendations to find the right balance of security, and most important is to understand the security position of your organization, and that's the crucial thing. So there's no one recipe for zero trust, but actually is to implement all the first of all, I would suggest that you implement the conditional access and multi-factor authentication, and these two will greatly increase the security, and these are the main two steps toward the zero trust strategy. And there are others as well, but depending on the organization, implement as many as you can, and stay safe.